Hi, I'm Samantha Anderson, Director of Communications for Newton Public Schools, and I'm here with Superintendent Van Rankin, and we're going to go over last night's Board of Education meeting and also answer any questions you may have about the meeting or about the school district in general. This is our first meeting since the school year started, so we may have some new questions, but the biggest topic of discussion was that Stay to Learn plan. It's a plan related to quarantine and students and staff. We got a lot of questions about it last night. So can you just explain it again in case people still aren't clear on what it is and who it affects?
Sure. This is an opportunity for students to remain in school that are considered close contacts. Those students that are unvaccinated, which would be obviously all of our students under the age of 12. And then there's obviously a population of students over the age of 12 as well. But if you remember last year, when anyone was considered a close contact, they had to a quarantine for a period of 10 to 14 days. It always depends upon how things work out when they were considered the contact and things of that nature. But we nurse layman put out some numbers or calculated some numbers from last year. We had 2,666 student quarantines. And from that, there were 10 positive cases that we know of that came from those quarantine situations. And 2 of those were from a known athletic event. So, you know, what that tells you is obviously we had a lot of students that were at home in quarantine, not having any sort of a capacity to get their education like they would have had they been in person. So that is the ultimate goal here. The Harvey County Health Department, we've worked with them to come up with this protocol to offer this opportunity, which there's 3 pieces of that, and all of this is optional. If you don't want to do this as a parent, you don't feel safe, you don't have to have your student do this because it's not necessarily easy. But there's a contract that parents would sign so they understand exactly what it does entail. And what has to happen is there has to be some daily testing. Obviously, the student has to remain asymptomatic, can't have any COVID symptoms. But there'll be daily testing, so they'd have to get there in the morning, first thing, report to the nurse's office. Have the antigen test, the swab. It doesn't go all the way up like the PCR, but they have the antigen tests. At this point, those are the ones that we are using. And if they are negative, and if they remain socially distanced and they remain masked during the whole course of the day, they can remain on site. Now, last night, I didn't know for sure as to whether or not athletics or activities are involved in this. At this point, we have permission only to allow them to stay in school for educational purposes, not for activities or athletics. So we're hoping by next week we can get that approval through the Harvey County Health Department. So once again, to reiterate, in order to be able to do this, you have to be asymptomatic. Parents have to sign the form that gives us permission to do so. We'll have that on file. They have to be available to help test their student in the morning through the swab. And then they have to remain masked and socially distanced during the course of the day. We know that this won't go perfectly. We know that there'll be issues with this, but we're trying to set this up to where we can keep kids in school as much as possible and keep everyone safe as well. So we know we've gotten some feedback that why are we doing this? You know, we're endangering the safety of all other students. Once again, we'll point back to the numbers. You know, 2,666 with 10 positive cases. And another thing to remember, you know, your kids are walking around now more than likely with students that are positive. We're up to 7 cases today, 7 student cases today. There were 6 last night. And we know that the numbers not going to go down during this surge. Obviously, that's what a surge is. So a lot of stuff, a lot of information.
And then we talked about it last night too. I know there's been a lot of interest in the structure out at Santa Fe at Lindley Hall. Can you let us know what's new there?
Well, At the time the agenda went out, I just wanted to make sure that folks were kind of aware a little bit, but we did get our report from our engineering company that is doing the building inspection to ensure the safety of the facility. As I said last night, I got that about 6 o'clock last night. I still have not had a lot of time to really dig into that. From what I've read so far, there is no difference from what I explained last evening. Essentially, what we have with Lindley Hall is the exterior, the parapet of the building, the exterior brick facade has essentially pulled away from the structure of the building. The brick ties that normally hold bricks up against the actual wall, the masonry wall, those things have over time, because of a lack of maintenance, which is a common thing to happen with brick buildings. If you don't tuck point those brick buildings and provide maintenance periodically with those things, moisture will begin to decay the mortar. You'll get some what they call organics in there, and you'll have the moisture getting behind the brick and actually deteriorating the brick ties that hold the brick to the brick parapet to the masonry wall. And so that's kind of what's happened, and that the wall is essentially leaning outward, and especially in the corners. But I was actually up on a lift about 2.5 weeks or so ago, and looking down on the very northwest corner of Lindley Hall, and you can see a bow in the wall, that exterior wall. So there is that danger of the exterior facade falling down. We were honestly probably lucky on June the 25th or 29th, whatever that day was when that storm came through. And those bricks did fall off of the west side of the building, because that was kind of the shot across the bow, so to speak, that we need to make sure we look more closely into that building. So all 4 exterior walls are not in a condition to where it is safe to have students or anyone walking around it or being around it, without some sort of tunnel that would stop the bricks from coming down on them. We also had them then, because of our concerns with the exterior, come and inspect the interior of the building. There are some structural issues with the masonry there as well. At this point, it appears that all of the interior I-beams that form the interior structure of the building that support the roof, that all looks pretty good, according to what the engineer had said. But we do have some separation of the interior walls from the bleachers, especially in the corners. And when you look in the corners of the building where the bleachers and the exterior wall come together, you can see that there's just a little bit of distance, a little bit of gap in those corners, which means that there's some separation there. We could probably allow students to be on the gym floor of the building. The engineer does not recommend any sort of individuals being in any of the bleachers, because if those walls were to fall, and if the I-beams that are essentially the trusses in the roof come down, the engineer speculates. Of course, nobody knows for sure, but engineer speculates that the integrity of those steel I-beams that form the roof are such that they wouldn't bow in the middle and crush anybody on the gym floor. Personally, I do not feel comfortable putting kids in there at this time. Repairs to that building would be very, very costly. Just the exterior facade, $1.5 million, $2 million. The interior damage, because there's also water damage on the brick on the interior where you've seen leaching of water. And so you've got essentially like some salt deposits that look like they're forming on a lot of areas of the masonry inside. To do all of that would be tremendously costly. So as a board, they'll have to consider what they want to do with that and what direction we go. But I would not anticipate having any sort of habitation of Lindley Hall with students at all this year. We do have a laundry area in there that our maintenance department uses, so we might We might allow that to continue because of where it is. It's a place that would that they would be pretty safe if something were to happen, and we would have to build a tunnel to get there and stuff. But other than that, Lindley Hall will not be used more than likely this year. So once again, a lot of information, and there's I don't know, it's an 11-page document that I still have to get through, and I just haven't been able to read it thoroughly yet.
Okay, we do have a lot of questions. The first, and correct me if I'm wrong, is asking why there is no mask mandate. We kind of followed the lead of the health department in strongly recommending masks, and at all, it's a board decision. Is that correct? Is that we kind of follow the health professionals in that?
Well, the professional advice is they strongly recommend masks for individuals. Okay, and once again, those are recommendations. All right, our Board of Education, as at this point in time, is not inclined to go that direction. So that is where we are. They have not chosen to go the route of mandating masks for all, and that is where we are right now.
But we are still strongly recommending them. Is that right?
Well, we've not changed the language. The language that we have mirrors what the recommendations are.
Okay, and this is a good question. Someone was wondering who decided to put the health department in charge of quarantining students, and that's not just in Harvey County. That's everywhere. It's probably like a state decision.
That's a legally, I believe that is their role. They're the county health department. They're the ones that can issue quarantines. Schools can exclude, but we cannot issue a quarantine order. The health departments can issue a quarantine order. They're the ones in our counties that can do that. So they are officially the body that does do that.
And then with sports, some parents were wondering, have you thought about how you would still do that 6 feet away for sports yet, or are you not there yet?
Right now, the stay to learn or the test to learn only applies to school. We do not yet have permission for athletics. I misspoke last night. I thought that was a part of that, but that is not accurate. We validated that today or confirmed that today. We hope to have that ability to do that for activities next week sometime. We hope we can. We hope that the Dr. Detweiler will see to allowing us to do that. Now, you know that's kind of difficult. You think about football. You can't socially distance in football, but you know the student could be out there, or the athlete could be out there participating in drills. They could be conditioning. You know, they could be isolated away, but watching the formations and stuff. Maybe if they're a wide receiver, they can participate. They just can't have, you know, that contact within 6 feet. So it's not going to be a perfect setup, but you know, once again, the goal is to try to keep as many kids on campus as we can and safe.
And then there seemed to be some confusion with the tests and the stay to learn plan. Is there a certain day that a negative test would get them out? Is it right away? Like if they're quarantined and then the very next day, can they go and get a test, or is there a timeline for that?
Well, the timeline of their quarantine is determined by the Harvey County Health Department. Okay. Every day, and Nurse Lehman will correct me if I'm wrong, but every day during that quarantine time where they're participating in stay to learn, they have to test every morning before they are allowed to go to class. Okay. So during the whole time of that quarantine that's been designated, they have to test every day when they come to campus. So I'm trying to find if there's anything in there. The quarantine stay will be 10 days, 14 days for the variants of concern without a test. So they'll work that out as an individual with the Harvey County Health Department in terms of the length of time, 10 to 14 days, when that ticker starts, depending upon when they were considered a close contact, and the nursing staff in the respective building would make sure they understand what has to happen every day.
And Carrie, we do have a running update on positive COVID cases for a district-wide, but she was wondering why we weren't going into like the specific buildings yet. And I believe you gave a good explanation last night for that. Will you just let her know?
Sure. Right now, we want to really work as hard as we can to protect the identity of those kids that are positive or staff members that are positive. And last year, whenever I reported the numbers, I never reported according to buildings, because if you've only got, like, for example, one kid in the building that's COVID positive, the rumor mill, even in a community this size, does run pretty quickly, and that can become an identifier. So we're really working hard to keep these the identity of these individuals that are COVID positive confidential. So that's why.
And again, if you just go to our district website and hit the COVID tab, you will see a constantly updated number for active cases in our district for now. And then who will be giving these tests? Do we have staff trained at each building? Will they be going around? Should parents plan on being there?
Yes, that's one of the conditions of the contract, is that the parents will assist in administering the test. And I know that's a burden on the part of parents, but also, as I had explained last night, we would rather the parent help. I hate to say secure the child, but I don't know how else to say it, right? Because sometimes, especially littles, when you put, well, even in somebody goes sticking something in my nose, I'm liable to fidget. So we want the parent to be able to do that. You don't want me restraining your child so the nursing staff can do the nasal swab. So that is also one of the conditions of that stay to learn or test to learn protocol. So that's just one of them.
Another clarification I'd like to make, because I see a little bit of confusion here. Can you explain what went into the fact that we aren't offering remote this year at all, or that we weren't able to?
Yeah, there was legislation that was passed that severely limits our capacity to offer a remote option for students. Okay, we don't have a K through 12 virtual school. We just don't. Now we have a partnership with SDAC this year, where some 9 through 12 students that were in a virtual environment with us. Last year we had a virtual program at our high school, but we had to make changes there. So there are some opportunities there at the secondary level, but it's actually through the SDAC Learning Center. It's no longer offered through our campuses. Legislation was passed last year that only allows up to 40 hours of what they call remote learning, and there's some conditions that have to be met in order for us to be able to offer that. When you figure there's 6.75 hours essentially in a school day, 40 hours does not even equal a quarantine period for most students. There are special allowances to allow you to go up to 240 hours, but that has to be approval by the Board of Education and then by the State Board of Education, each individual, and it's by student, it's not by school or by district. So that legislation, no matter what anyone says, kind of hampers our ability to meet the needs of the students in that regard. Doing both on the part of staff was extremely difficult last year. Teaching remotely students that were online at the same time you were trying to teach in your class, those students that were in person, it was more than a challenge in many cases. And I'd like to, we just weren't that successful. So I also cannot direct my staff to provide a remote learning option, because then that clock starts with that 40 hours. So that's just kind of a function of where we are. And frankly, folks, I don't like it. And my board members don't like it either. But, sometimes rules are made that we have to follow based upon the parameters that we're given. And, it's just not a good situation. It just really isn't. So that was House Bill 2134, that legislation that was passed this past spring. I believe it was 2134, but so that kind of limits what we can do. I will say that I don't know of any district across the state. I'm sure that there are, but none in the region that I'm aware of that is giving a true remote option, based upon quarantine situations and stuff. There are some that are offering virtual school, but we are not among them offering that virtual school option, especially in that K-8 setting. we are not set up to do that. I don't have the staffing to do that. And it's just not a good situation. I wish I had a better answer.
And then if people have questions about if they have a student who has an IEP and they are quarantined, would that be more of a case by case? You contact our special ed department?
Contact your building principal first, and your teacher to find out what options there are, and they'll work through each one of those to get minutes met somehow. It may be that they have to offer compensatory services or something like that outside of the normal calendar. I mean, there's options there that will have to meet the minutes as it relates to special services. That's a very good question.
And as far as keeping the stay to learn students away from each other in schools for lunch and stuff, it's really just going to be a case because every school is laid out so differently, every classes. So there's not one set plan district wide. It'll be on individual school basis, I'm guessing. Is that right?
It will. And just like you said, Sam, every building and every building has different capacity to do those kinds of things. And in some cases, for example, in a couple of our elementary schools, some of those class sections are pretty big. They may have to get creative with how they do that. But that is one of the conditions to have that opportunity, is that they remain socially distanced while on campus.
Right. And Amber, it is nasal swabs, not saliva tests.
It is at this time. And I talked with Nurse Lehman. Actually, I didn't talk. I emailed back and forth with Nurse Lehman about that. And she said it was actually the littles had a tremendously hard time trying to produce enough saliva to be able to get a test. And that's why most people are doing that nasal swab. So that was a question that was asked last night as well.
Right, I'm just getting caught up on the questions. And again, those who are vaccinated, it's a different, or those who have had COVID in the last 6 months, is it a different situation for them?
Yeah, if you're vaccinated or you've had COVID within the past, you've had a positive COVID test within the past 6 months, you don't have to quarantine if you're a close contact and are asymptomatic.
And then what about truancy in quarantined students? Do we have
that won't apply. I mean, they'll be considered an excused absence. We will not penalize the kid. It'll be like they're homesick, and that we'll communicate homework back and forth. Like the parents would arrange that to happen if the student were ill, mildly ill, but not well enough to go to school. So that's how that can happen. Now, that's one of the things that we're looking at to try to figure out a way to provide some academic support for those kids on quarantine. We won't call it remote learning, but I know, for example, at the high school, they've got some tutors available after school. I'm sure that they would be available for high school students. We're looking to see if there's some ways we could do something similar to that for the elementary level. It always goes back to, okay, that wouldn't be your teacher necessarily, but it might be a third grade teacher that can provide some support. Our curriculum, our resources are the same throughout the district. So, they may be in a little bit different spot, but there could be some opportunity to offer that expertise. And as I said, I'm not directing my staff to do that, but I know a lot of our teachers, just teachers in general, it doesn't matter where they are. They want to help kids, and they'll do it whatever they can to help kids. So some of your teachers are probably, if your students are on quarantine now, are probably getting some additional assistance from teachers. We just can't, we just aren't going to get the clock started on the 40 hours at this point.
And then Heather, it won't be testing for every student every day. It's just part of the stay to learn plan, which we covered earlier in the video. And it's just for those who are close contacts, unvaccinated, who would be quarantined by the health department. So if you have more questions, just let us know.
I want to emphasize that that's an option for parents. It's not at all required. If you participate, the requirements have to be met, but it is just an option. We had some folks say, I just won't send my kid. That's totally fine. We totally understand that.
What about, would there be any changes for the HCC dual credit classes? And I think they mean about the quarantine and how that would work. Or is
I
that
don't-
their decision?
I don't have any information on how that, I mean, if we're offering this stuff here in our campus, I mean, they're following our rules. I mean, they're not dictating what we do on our campus. And the same thing with the area-wide, that student that was asked about area-wide students this morning, you know, if they're attending here, once again, if they're an area-wide student, though, the parent has to be there to help administer the assessment. So.
And then again, Stephanie, the stay to learn is just an option. You can either choose to take that option or choose to quarantine your student at home. You do not have to take the option.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think that's the end of our questions. We'll give everybody a couple more minutes to leave any more questions you may have. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Mr. Van Rankin?
I do. This is going to be the last official Facebook Live session, more than likely, that Samantha is going to be conducting. Samantha, as all of you probably know, or most of you, is leaving USD 373 to take another position, and we wish her well. She's done a great job. In my year that I've been here, I've really appreciated what she's done. So, you know, give her a big high five or a big thumbs up for everything that she does for the district, because she does a wonderful job of orchestrating the communication side. So I want to thank you, Sam. I won't tell anybody how much you paid me to say that stuff, but I appreciate greatly what you do.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And I do love working for the district. I just had a really great opportunity, but I live in Newton, so I'll still be around. Now I can comment on Facebook during the lives and say, I can't hear right now. So I'm excited about that. I plan to take advantage of that opportunity, but I do appreciate so much just being able to work here. And I love the community and I love the school district, but now we have more COVID to talk about, not me. So that's exciting. Okay, immunity. They said if they have a test to prove immunity, do they have to quarantine? And again, right now, the only exceptions are if you've had COVID in the last 6 months or you're vaccinated. Is that right?
That is how I understand that. You would have to take that up with the Harvey County Health Department because they are issuing all quarantine orders.
Okay, so that's a good question for them. And then social distancing, ideally, is it still 6 feet or is it 3 feet?
For the stay to learn, it's 6 feet.
Okay. And again, it's ideally. So again, I think that's all the questions we have. If we have any, feel free to shoot us an email at info@usd373.org. Thank you again for watching, and thanks for letting me be your district's communications director. I've really enjoyed it. So I'm going to try not to cry though. Just kidding. I will miss everybody. Thank you for everything. And thank you for being here, Mr. Van Rankin.
Absolutely.
All right, bye.